So picture this, you're jolted awake by explosions, smoke fills your hallways, and strangers in tactical gear are screaming at you while holding your wife at gunpoint. And later you find out that this was not meant for you at all, that the FBI actually raided the wrong home. And later when you bring a lawsuit against them based on this mistake, they claim that you can't bring a lawsuit and hold them accountable because they have discretion to plan the raid and also get it wrong. However, you get the case all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court issues a 9-0 unanimous ruling in your favor, and now the 11th Circuit is re-reviewing this case. That's exactly what happened to one family, but this has broad implications for everyone in America. So let's break down what is happening in this critical case. Now, before we jump into this video, if you guys want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply subscribing to the channel. Also, double check to make sure YouTube has not unsubscribed you because they love to do that, especially on two-way channels. Also, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is First Form. You guys know that First Form is an amazing company. Their culture is unmatched. They're pro-freedom, pro-America. They support the Second Amendment, and they put out great supplements. So if you're interested, check them out using the link down below. And right now, they have a ton of Black Friday sales going on. So if you're interested in something, check them out right now because you can actually get a lot of value based on, Black Friday going on right now. So as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing a recent 9-0 unanimous decision issued by the Supreme Court, which all gun owners and Americans really should be aware of. This case is called Martin versus United States, and it comes out of a suburban Atlanta area where back in 2017, the FBI executed a pre-dawn raid, but the only problem was that they got the wrong house. They raided the wrong family. The family inside that house sued the FBI for getting this wrong, and they brought a claim based on the Federal Tort Claims Act, also known as the FTCA. Now, this made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and the question became, does the federal government get to walk away from liability, or can someone hold them accountable just like a private person could hold someone else accountable for this type of major mistake? And on review, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled in favor of the family and remanded the case back down to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals for a new ruling. And now the 11th Circuit has set this case for oral arguments early next year. So again, a big case and a new decision that's going to happen in light of what the Supreme Court just said. Now, here's what happened in this case. The FBI agents raided the home of Katrina Martin and her boyfriend at the time, where they also live with their 7-year-old son. And what happened was essentially the FBI was targeting some gang members who were believed to be in a certain home. There was some scouting that kind of happened the day before and the morning before. The FBI agents kind of scouted the area. They had some pictures of the home that they were supposed to target. They also had identified a certain vehicle, but when they got there and it was really dark, they didn't actually have the right house. One of the big errors that also happened was the fact that one of the lead investigators who was supposed to plan this out put the address in his GPS and it routed him to the wrong home. They didn't double check to make sure that it was the proper address or the right home. The home was stated to not actually have numbers on it. They also didn't double check the mailbox, and the officers claimed that they didn't have enough time to actually double check or confirm. And because of that, they went into the wrong home. What ultimately they ended up doing was a pre-dawn raid where they smashed in the front door, detonated flashbang grenades inside, pulled out Katrina Martin, pulled out her boyfriend in handcuffs. They were hiding in a closet with a shotgun, pulled them out, handcuffed them, held Katrina Martin half-dressed at gunpoint, also pulled the son out. And then while this was all happening, after they were arrested, one of the officers was kind of scanning the area and found some mail on a coffee table and noticed that it had the wrong address. And at that point, he stated to everybody, hey, we got the wrong house. And everybody kind of had that huge, oh crap moment. We raided the wrong home. And so quickly they decided to leave the house. They told Katrina Martin and her boyfriend that they would be back. They made a mistake and they would explain what happened. So they left the home, went 3 doors down to the correct home, and then raided the proper home. And as a response to this, the family sued the FBI and they brought a claim based on the Federal Tort Claims Act, which is a law that allows people to sue a federal government or the federal agency for certain wrongful acts by federal employees when the employee is acting in the scope of their job. Now, normally the government and individual agents are shielded from, these types of lawsuits, but the FTCA is one of those situations where the government has agreed to carve out an area where you can bring like tort claims against them based on these types of situations. But the FTCA also has a long list of exceptions where it says you can't bring these type of tort claims against us. And one of those is an exception called the discretionary function exception. That exception shields the government when the wrongful act stems from one of their officers or agents making a discretionary decision, meaning something that is a decision that involves actual judgment, choice, or policy considerations. So in this case, the family tried to sue the FBI for the agent's actions and the mistake that he made under the FTCA, but the government claimed that they fell under the discretionary function exception of the FTCA because it was a discretionary function, or it was within the discretion of the officer to plan the raid, plan it how he did, which also potentially got it wrong. Now, the family brought a lawsuit in the district court, and the government moved to dismiss the case, arguing both that the intentional tort and discretionary function exceptions barred this type of claim, and the district court sided with the FBI. The case was then appealed to the 11th Circuit, and on review, the 11th Circuit also ruled in favor of the FBI. This then led this case to go to the United States Supreme Court, who granted review to this case, and then the Supreme Court issued a 9-0 unanimous decision in favor of the family. The Supreme Court, in that unanimous opinion written by Justice Gorsuch, vacated the 11th Circuit's decision and sent the case back down to the lower court. The Supreme Court held first that the law enforcement proviso only modifies the intentional tort exception. It doesn't apply to all aspects of the FTCA, which is one thing that the federal government was arguing, and also that the 11th Circuit had found. And that's important because it kind of opened up some of this challenge for the family here in the lower court. Now, the second thing that the Supreme Court actually did is they vacated and remanded the case back to the 11th Circuit for a rebriefing and new decision based on the discretionary function exception and whether it bars the Martins' negligent and intentional tort claims that they brought against the FBI for the FBI Wrong House raid. So this is back in the hands of the 11th Circuit because of that unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court. And recently, the DOJ filed the response to the 11th Circuit, and they argued that the Circuit Court should still rule the same exact way despite what the Supreme Court just said. And they argued that is because the family's claims are still barred under other laws like qualified immunity, and they also still fail under the FTCA despite what the Supreme Court said. The government's central position is that the agent's mistaken entry into the wrong home resulted directly from discretionary decisions about how to conduct the pre-dawn, raid and surveillance, how to approach the house in the dark, how to navigate without alerting any suspects, how to identify the structure from external features. And so they claim all of that and all that planning is a discretionary function. They argued also that no statute, regulation, or constitutional rule is actually binding on the FBI and how they have to plan for this type of raid. And therefore, you can't say that they got this wrong because really there is no standard for how they have to plan this. Well, now this case is heading for re-arguments in the 11th Circuit in light of what the Supreme Court just said. The 11th Circuit has set oral arguments to take place in this case during the week of March 23rd. So soon the appeals court will have to reevaluate this case, re-rule on it based on what the Supreme Court just said. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does this impact you and other gun owners? Well, here's why this is so critical. Wrong house raids, mistaken identity arrests, excessive force situations impact a lot of law-abiding gun owners. When a raid goes bad, people inside are often armed, they act in self-defense, and if a mistake like this happens, there could be deadly consequences for either the officer or the individual. And if the government can hide behind discretion every single time that they make this type of huge mistake, well, then there's no accountability and there is no course correcting. The Supreme Court's ruling in Martin narrows the government's ability to avoid some of these lawsuits by claiming just broad immunity, and these cases reinforce that the federal government and potentially the individual agents may be held accountable if they recklessly invade someone's home or make this type of critical mistake. So that's what's currently happening in another significant 9-0 unanimous decision issued by the Supreme Court in a new case that is now being redecided in the 11th Circuit in light of what the Supreme Court just said. It is now set for oral arguments early next year, and it's going to be interesting to see, how does the 11th Circuit handle this based on what the Supreme Court just said, and also the new arguments put forward by the DOJ saying that essentially they should exactly rule the same way, even though the Supreme Court just reversed. So as we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, or subscribe. You can also check out one of the two videos here on the screen that the YouTube algorithm thinks that you'll find helpful. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.